Okay. So I'll be speaking on academic excellence, specifically effective reading and time management, trying to discover like techniques for reading and managing academic tasks. So like what we'll cover this afternoon is ways to read to understand little time, how to manage overlapping tasks and prioritize, why your outlook and attitude are important, and what can you do to stay motivated and productive. productive. So the first part is effective reading. Now we understand that as architecture students, we're under so we're under so much time constraints that it can feel very overwhelming when you're trying to figure out, oh, how do we tackle reading, especially when what you have to do right now is seems so much more important than the reading that you should be doing, because you never know when tests will come up. And we have so much materials to read, so much to understand the structures, the components, with all the assignments that we will still have to read as we are doing them. So how can we like approach reading in these sort of situations? Well, the first step is, instead of trying to put yourself that the only time you have to read is right before the test, you should try to prevent those kind of situations. So you read in short bursts. That is, try to, after like every class or at the end of every day, go through your notes, whether mentally, whether physically, and try to sit down and understand what they taught you today. Because the understanding you gain, like immediately after the knowledge is transmitted, will stick more than what you do in all those rush times. And you should always practice active listening. Now, active listening is when you're hearing something, but instead of just hearing it and letting it go, as you hear it, you try to internalize and try to understand what you're hearing. Because you find that the things we do on our own terms and by ourselves will stick more than what people will tell us. So someone might tell you that you should always put baking powder in when you're making pancake. But you might not remember the next time baking powder because you just heard it and just let it go. But if you sit down and try to understand why should you, the importance of it, it will tend to stick more. And that brings me into the next point, which is asking questions. You should always ask questions on what you're being taught, because asking questions give a better understanding, which is the main focus of reading after all, because you have to understand, because not all lecturers will just take you cramming and pushing it out in exams. They'll most times they'll ask you to put your own understanding, your own spin on the material, which is why you should also relate to the class in your own language and terms. But people speak in different languages, because language, although universal, is sometimes very personal to each and every person. So what a person might explain a concept one way and you not understand till you try to understand and explain it to yourself in your own way. But we don't always have time to read, because it should be truth is sometimes the deadline that we have to meet next week is sometimes actually more severe, because I've had cases where like I know we have tests next week, but I have assignments to do, and that assignment needs to be done. So I keep pushing the reading. So how do you read in these kind of situations? So there are three main reading techniques. There's the SQ3R technique, there's the broad brush reading, there's the deep dive reading. The SQ3R technique is basically the broad general technique that we all fall back on. So that's the survey, question, read, recite, review. You survey by skimming through, that will lead us into the broad brush reading. You just try to give a brief overview so that you know at least you've seen everything that you have to see. You question by going back and questioning why is it this way? Why do we need to do this? What does this do? Then you read again to find those answers to those questions. Then you recite, that is, you try and cram some particular things that you can't just be on spin on. Then you review all over again. That's going through everything and doing the whole process all over again. So that will give you, I think, that's the most summarized technique and the most balanced technique, especially because you can do it if you know, if you like are very quick in reading, you can do it in like short time, you can do it in long time. And that leads us to the next technique. There's broad brush reading. This one is just want to do and go. You skim the entire thing, you scan for things you should remember, then you just try and remember from what you scan. I usually use this technique when I didn't know there was tests or there's like a quick surprise test, and I want to like get everything get everything into my head. But the thing about this technique is it can very easily fail you because your brain will not remember some things because it's just going too fast. It hadn't had the time to process. So it's just like maybe some things that you thought were interesting that you remember. So the I think the core foundation for the broad reading technique is to have a previous understanding. It works best when you already knew what was going on before you even start scanning. So it depends. You can trust the technique more when you really listen in class and you already have like general knowledge of the material. Then there's the deep dive reading. This deep dive reading is like when you really go into what you're reading, you try to understand everything about him. Then there is in two ways. There's the active and detailed reading. The active reading is basically you're reading with the intent to understand. Is the most effective, and you can also do it in short amount of time. Then detailed reading is you're reading with the intent to understand and be able to form your own ideas on what you're reading. You'll find detailed reading mostly for literature review, for research, because when you're doing literature review, you can understand what you're reading, but you also need to understand enough that you can be able to form a whole 2 pages on what you've read. But the main foundation reading it will always be understanding because if you don't understand what you've read, you will never be able to win a conversation on what you've read. Sometimes I think of reading as preparing for an argument, like an argument in the sense that people, well, not an argument, but like more of a debate, that people will ask me questions and I should try and be able to answer those questions, but not just saying what someone else said. So to be able to answer in that kind of fashion, you need to understand what you read. But it's better to safe than sorry. It's always the best scenario to make time to read, write, and listen in class because you never know how you may feel or how your body may be feel in those last conditions. You may think, oh, when it's time to read before the test, the night before, I'll be so hyper, up, so energetic, I'll be able to do it. Then, God forbid, you suddenly get sick and your body is not just cooperating with you. So it's always best to try and make time to read and to revise and to listen in class. Listening in class is very important because you may sometimes it just works that way that you may not remember anything you read before the test, but the small thing you heard in class was what helped you to ask your to answer that question. But how do you manage the time rest of submissions? That'll bring me into my next part, which is how to work and read within the deadlines. So managing time can be so hard, especially when you feel like you have so much work to do and there's only 24 hours in a day, class start by 8 a.m., you leave studio by 6 p.m., then you still have to eat, you still have to sleep, you may still have to like clean your room, wash your clothes, and you still have like so many submissions to do. So then you make you feel like there's not really enough time to do anything else. But the first thing you need to tackle is that like initial panic, because that panic will tend to paralyze you and make you like, oh well, there's not much time to do anything, so what can I do? Then it'll be easy to just fall into that negative space and think that you need to give up on everything. So the first thing to do is you need to take a deep breath and relax, and to take note of the related deadlines and lifelines. Now, what this will help you do is it will help you to prioritize, because there are long-term tasks and there are short-term tasks, which is basically the urgent tasks and the important tasks. I'll get into that in the future slides. So you need to like take note of everything you need to get done, even the things that don't seem important, because you still have to take care of yourself and take care of your materials and everything around you. So there are two main tools for managing time. There's the Eisenhower matrix, or the time management box, and there is consistency. For the Eisenhower matrix, prioritization, that is prioritizing both urgency and importance, and is the way to battle the mere urgency effects. Now, consistency, not perfectionism, is working regularly and reliably towards accomplishing a goal while accepting that your work may be imperfect. Now, the Eisenhower matrix is basically 4 boxes that represent urgent, not urgent, important, or are not important. For the urgent important box, that's the things that you need to do. That is things that are due tomorrow and are very crucial. That is like all those assignments or tests that are due tomorrow and they're very important because you need that grade. Then not urgent but important are things that are not necessarily due short term but are due long term but are very, very important. Things like if your studio is due in 3 weeks, it's still important, but it's not really that urgent right now, but you need to do it. So you need to schedule it into your daily schedule. So at least you work on it by day, so you'll be consistent with it. Now, the urgent and not important are things that you need to do, but it's not really important right now. It's not as important as the non as the important thing. So I don't know what this may be for you. It may be you have to wash your clothes, which is urgent, necessarily important. You still will do it, but it's not something that will take priority over these two. There is not urgent and not important. That is things that you may want to do, but you don't need to do it, and it's not due soon. Maybe you've been saving that YouTube video to watch later. Or you have that new series that you want to watch. It's not urgent, it's not important. So you can either remove it completely or just push it forward. Or you can also multitask if you can, if it's something that you can multitask with other stuff or play in the background. So you need to keep in mind the long-term importance of every task that you have, urgent or important, and to focus on that. You should always think of the consequences of your actions, because in future you would really appreciate if you thought of him or her when you were in the present. No, sometimes we think that like, oh, me in the future will take care of this problem. But sometimes you think to yourself, in next 2 days, would I in my future self appreciate if I did this task back then? Would I feel better, or will I be annoyed that I didn't think to do the task then when I could have done it and now I have to do it then? So you need to think of the long-term importance and consequences of every task that you have to do. Now, there was a United States President, Dwight D. Eisenhower. He was the one who, well, actually, he created this quote, and I think Stephen Covey was the one who translated it into the Eisenhower matrix. So he said in the 1961 address to the Central Association, who can define for us with with accuracy the difference between the long term and the short term, especially whenever our affairs seem to be in crisis. We are almost compelled to give our first attention to the urgent present rather than the important future. I found that the mere urgency phenomenon or effect is what leads into procrastination alongside perfectionism. You think that what you have to do is so urgent, so important that you need to focus all your attention on it. You need to be perfect. Like keep procrastinating things that are also important, but are not that urgent. And that's how I get situations where you have to do your prelims in 2 days or in 1 week, and it feels so overwhelming. So to try and um offset that panic, you should always work consistently. Now, consistency is not linear. It doesn't look like 20% of everything every day. It's more like 10%, 30%, or even 5% of different things every day in variations. Things that the things that are urgent, you devote most of your time to, but also devote some of your time to things that are not urgent, but they're still important. So you always, so when you're
I don't
facing a
know.
new task,
It's still not change there now. Are you sure? There was no money there before. I don't even like
Sorry, please, can we
it's
mute
hard.
ourselves?
You should check it because I don't get
Olubosi,
where
James
it's your question a
Toparati,
bit.
please, can you mute yourself?
Jesus, you mention my name for what? I don't know there. Wait, am I muted?
Please, okay, thank you. Sorry, Ololade, you
sorry.
can continue.
Okay, so when you're facing new tasks, you start small in proportion. You make sure that you you approach the task not thinking of it as a big task. You know, like you need to complete to get this system level before you can take a break. For example, like when you have research to do and you're trying to complete your literary review, but you have, let's say you have like 3 days to complete it. On the first day, you can think, oh, I'll finish this section. Maybe this section, because you are trying to get into it, you start small. Then sometimes you can even find yourself in that you completed way more than you thought you would. And that helps continue to reach the end. Also schedule that scheduling you should set reminders as sometimes it helps to time yourself time yourself because time runs faster than especially when you're trying to do something. It runs so fast. So the timing yourself helps to keep you in check. But you also roll with the punches when life's predictable unpredictability disrupts your routine. If you oversleep and you want to wake up by 2 o'clock, it's not the end of the world. You can still, let's say you want to wake up by 2, you wake up by 4, you have to start by 6. You you wake up by 4 and the problem is when you start thinking, oh, all my time is gone. Because it's not gone. You still have 2 hours left and you can do a lot in 2 hours. So you should always try and learn to adapt and adjust to the situation. And you should always celebrate milestones and allow small breaks for rest. When when sometimes in research you may think, oh, I'll complete the whole of chapter 3 tonight, but you only got halfway and you start thinking that, oh, I didn't do anything. You should always try and celebrate that, like, at least I got halfway and I'm halfway to my goal. And you should always allow small breaks for rest. I think sometimes my mistake, especially in front level, is I would walk like with no sleep for maybe 3 days, or like with very little rest for 3 days. I'll be sleeping in class, which means I can't listen as well as I used to. And the next day that I still have to work, I just can't move. I just can't move. My body's in pain. Nothing is working out. Then that can last for 2 days, which means 2 days of me being able to do something, at least no matter how small, is gone. But if I took at least small breaks in those first 3 days of working without rest, I would be able to still have some some energy in those 2 days. So you should always like allow small breaks for your rest. Now, you should also reframe setbacks as part of the process. But setbacks will happen. It's just how life should be. So instead of seeing your setbacks as the enemy, try to just walk around it, and that brings back us back into learn to adjust yourself and learn to adapt to situations. And you should embrace the process instead of the end goal. If you learn to enjoy or accept the journey of what you're doing, you even know when you've reached the goal of all of like what trying to do. Then it's like taking a walk. Sometimes you may think that you need to get to point B in the next 5 minutes, then you will not enjoy what the line of point A to point B. Now, and if you keep doing that, you learn to hate what you're doing, and no one likes to do what they hate, which leads to you don't want to do the work next time that you have to do the work. So learning to embrace this process instead of trying to fight against it will help offset that negativity attached to what you have to do. And also talk back when the perfectionist inside you is saying that this work has to be perfect, it shows them to try and talk back against that, because no work has to be perfect. Sometimes you may think you may devote 5 hours to what you're doing. The person who devoted 2 hours to the same thing will get a higher score. And not the person marking your work isn't necessarily looking at perfection, because sometimes they won't read what you wrote. They just read to get the general idea and move on. And if you spend so much time trying to be eloquent, be detailed, and you bury the point of what you're trying to do under all this big talk and big grammar, it can reduce your mark. So the point isn't necessarily to be perfect, but it's to do the work well, even though there may be some small mistakes, but it's to get the general message across and do the work well. So some things to remember as we enter the closing of this session is to get an understanding of yourself and what works for you. Be proud of your work and stay positive. To pace yourself and rest. Working on fumes can lead to stress, fatigue, poor health, anger, irritation, can make you so cranky, which no one likes a cranky person. Headaches and burnout, which can be hard to recover from. I've learned that like if I think too much about something, I get these horrible migraines that can last 2 days, and I also have to walk through these migraines. So now I just try to avoid getting headaches and in the first place. And burnout can seem like small, but when it just happens to you, you won't want to do anything. If you worked so hard during the week and you finally reach Saturday, but you're burnt out, you won't have any energy to do anything on Saturday. And it's very sad when that happens to me, because Saturday is like the freest day of the week, especially in see when you have Sunday and you're in second service and your day will start by 12 and probably end by whenever. Because Saturday can start by 8 and end by a solid 10 if you still want to sleep, and that's a lot of time. So trying to avoid burnout is kind of the best way to approach like your well-being, and you do that by pacing yourself and rest. You should always remember to stay motivated and to find inspiration from wherever you can. Sometimes if I'm tired on Saturday, going around my classmates, I feel like, oh, where they are right now in this house, another, how they're approaching it, and I don't want to fall behind. So it helps me find inspiration to continue what I'm doing. And motivation always comes from within. Also, forgive yourself for wanting a break. Sometimes you just don't want to do anything, and that's okay as long as you get yourself out in the nick of time and do something. if you want a break, you can still have that break. But what I do is I always gauge myself on where I am. If I'm still like far behind, I'll try and not take a break. Maybe at the same time, but like if I'm at a far enough level, I might be able to have a break then. And you should always make sure to take care of yourself. Now, as we round up, the key takeaways I would say for this session is to always make time for understanding what you are reading and reading also. When you want to read in rational times, you always read generally, yet actively. If I read before exam, I always like try to cover the entire material. But as I'm reading, I'm pausing to understand one particular thing or points that I can at least be able to twist when the exam comes around in my own words. You should always prioritize, think of the long-term consequences, and to always be consistent. Something is always better than nothing, and to take care of your mind and body and to be positive. Okay, thank you so much for listening to this session. If you want to contact me, you can contact me on my school email, oladebafemipgs@stu.cu.edu.ng. You can also contact me at grandolade@gmail.com. Thank you so much for having me.